Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Behind the Job. I'm Scott Salter and today we've got another great episode lined up for you. Now last week we spoke to Helen Tanton. Helen's a research fellow at the Dana-Farber Institute in Boston. She was some great work researching cancer and she provides some great insight into anyone considering postdoctorate and PhD level qualifications. This week we've got another great guest. We're speaking to Dan Benzie. Now, Dan is the lead software developer at a startup called Howsy. He provides some great insight for students into his own unconventional route to being a software developer, the tips and tricks and what you can expect going into that industry, and also some great insight into when he's building his team, when he's hiring fresh grads, junior developers, what he's looking out for, the challenges you might face in coding challenges and stuff like that. Great episode, great insight that I'm sure you'll find really useful if you're looking to go into that industry. Enjoy it. I'm really excited today to be joined by Daniel Benzie, who's the lead software developer at Howsy. Hi Dan, how are you?
Hi Scott, good, thanks. Yourself?
Yes, not too bad, thank you. Dan, for those who don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself, your story today, and what you do at Howsy.
Yeah, sure. So I had quite a non-traditional route into software development. I didn't do a computer science degree. And I actually didn't even do computer sciences at A levels or anything similar. I was working a job that I didn't really like in insurance and had always been interested in computers. And I happened to see a job for a junior developer at a local web agency called 10 Yetis.
Yeah.
It's actually where I met you, Scott.
It is, yeah. We go back.
A long time ago. And that was when I was around 20, and I just applied for the job, not really with much optimism that I would get it. But the guy that was hiring for the position, Andy and Ross, they were both super friendly and ended up taking a chance with me. So I just learned a lot on the job, a lot of reading, YouTube videos and everything after hours to get to sort of the level that was required there. I stayed with. Sorry.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say I stayed with 10 Yetis for like 7 years nearly. The only reason I left was because I was going to go traveling.
Yeah,
and I came back and applied for a job as sort of a middleweight software developer for Howsy, a startup in London, trying to solve like the property rental problem. I was working for them for around 6 months when I got asked to be lead developer there, really. Yeah.
And you said you took a slightly unorthodox route into software development. Reflecting back now, how do you think that's benefited you maybe as opposed to maybe going to university or like if you had gone to university, the benefits of that?
I guess there are positives and negatives. I'm 28 and I obviously have a lot more job experience than most people my age when applying for jobs. Typically, if you've done software engineering, you might not have started university until you were, 19 or 20 or something.
Yeah.
You've got a 3-year course, and maybe you go traveling or something afterwards. You might not start actually working in a job until you're 24, 25. Obviously, by that time, I'd already had 5 years actual real life work experience working alongside other developers in an office environment. On the flip side of that, I've had to work a lot harder over the years learning software sort of engineering principles. The things that you were taught at university, I've had to teach myself. So there are positives and negatives, really.
And I guess you had to learn in a live environment almost, because obviously working at 10 Yetis, you were working on clients or with clients. So, university, maybe you would have had more room for mistakes and errors.
Yeah, exactly. Luckily, obviously with 10 Yetis, it was more an agency. So the software engineering principles weren't necessarily as stringent there, just because of the kind of work you produce.
Yeah.
But definitely, I had to learn on the job, and I also had to take my personal time to learn. So, there are positives and negatives, really.
And talk us through what does a day look like in the life of Dan Benzie at Howsy, and the difference maybe, obviously when we work together at an agency, you're working on clients, mainly on websites, and how does that differ to, being in a startup environment that's trying to solve this problem within, like you said, estate agents?
Yeah, so, basically a typical day, I still do a lot of programming. I'd say 75% of my time is still, writing code. as lead developer, I make most of the architecture decisions here, so deciding on the technology that we use and how we sort of implement the solutions. I have to lead the team obviously now, so that includes like one-to-ones, giving feedback where appropriate,
Yeah.
distribution of workload and sort of the management of our resources. Also sort of in charge of the hiring and the sort of the resources that we need. So if how many new developers do we need to manage if we're going to hit these targets? But I would still say, which is completely a good thing, that most of my time spent writing code. And the way we operate at Howsy is probably the way that a lot of startups and a lot of businesses operate. We have a ticketing system we use, Jira, and you can see sort of the tickets that need to be done and that need to be worked on. And yeah, I would just like the rest of the team, unless I'm working on something specific, I would just pick the highest priority and start working on that.
And what would you say the biggest challenges you face as a software developer?
Biggest challenges, it's probably for me now, building a team for the developers with like a similar mindset. You've got to be committed to the project, as well as just software engineering. You've got to be passionate, I suppose, about the work that you produce. Unfortunately, come across some developers in my time that don't necessarily care about the quality of the code they're writing, more just whether it works or not.
Yeah.
Which is fine when you work for a smaller company, but when you're working alongside like 10, 15, 20 other developers, it's not going to scale if nobody can understand the code that you write. And primarily, software development's about communication. So you're not just writing the code for yourself to see if it works. You're writing it for somebody that might be working on it 12 months down the line. They need to be able to understand what it's doing. You need to be clear with your intent.
And I guess in a startup environment, you talked about getting developers that will buy into the same, ethos and what you're working towards. In a startup environment where you are trying to solve this issue, that's particularly important.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to find other people that are passionate. I'm sure if you rented a house before, which I think you will have done, Scott, although you own now, right?
Yes, I've been a renter.
Yeah, exactly. Landlords are not the easiest people to deal with oftentimes. Not to say there aren't good ones out there, but I think we've all been through like contacting a letting agency, receiving no response, difficulty getting our deposit back, just the little things like that. So it is nice if we can find developers that also have had the same struggles. And oftentimes with most people in London, renting's a bit of a nightmare here, so they always have.
And what would your advice be to sort of current students who are looking to go on their own journey within coding or development? What would your advice be for them?
The first piece is to prioritize sort of good software engineering principles over learning like one language, because it's easy once you've got the basics down. It's actually easy to learn other languages.
Okay.
It will come very easily to you, but the hard part is really the principles and design patterns. Also, I would say there's a bit of a misunderstanding about the typical software engineer in that they can work solo on their own with little communication with everybody else. And actually, that might work if you're working in a very big company or a very small company where you don't work alongside other people so much. But actually, if you want to sort of progress in your software career, it's very important that you can communicate with other people in the business, the other developers and also the product team. It's really important. The notion of the secluded like software engineer, just headphones in, not talking to anybody, it doesn't really translate if you wanna go far in the field. It's not how you'll get ahead.
And would you advise? I mean, one of the things, obviously, we work together, but I always notice you doing, I suppose, was working on side projects. There might be fun things, but I remember you doing things like the Beard Olympics and notifying stuff like that. And is that a really good thing for young software developers to be, working on kind of side projects to develop their own skills?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to learn is by doing so. If you can pick things that you're interested in and build projects based on it, then yeah, do it. Not only will you learn lots, you might, end up making some money, or you might even build a product that becomes your job. I know other developers that have done just that. We had developers here that have gone off to build on products that they've built in their spare time, and it's ended up actually being their primary source of income. So,
and
yeah.
The world of sort of tech and digital and development is one that's obviously always evolving. How do you stay sort of ahead of the curve, and how important is that? I'm guessing, you could be working on something and then something new comes out that changes the way that you do it or what you've done.
Yeah, it happens all of the time. It's always moving forward. Really, you've got to keep moving. You can't remain stagnant, because if you do, then you might find that next time you're applying for a job, your skills in the market aren't really relevant anymore, and you'll find it difficult to find a job somewhere. The best way to do it is really just to spare your personal time to do research. We've got we give time here to employees to research things to do with tech. And it's one of the benefits of working here. And all they have to do in return is to give a little presentation on what they've learned. So it doesn't necessarily have to be related directly to what we do at Howsy, although obviously as we're developers, it has to be tech related. But as long as after like 2 weeks, you can go away and come back and do a presentation on what you've learned. So a lot of companies do give you the opportunity to do that. You can also attend conferences. There are lots, especially in London, and I'm sure almost every big city around the world. There are conferences and talks put on at Google Campus and places like it. And also learning from your peers, whether they're more junior or senior than you. Mostly everybody's got something to teach.
Great. And you mentioned that part of your role is obviously building your sort of dev team. And if you were going to hire a fresh graduate to join the team, what kind of skills or personality traits or experience would you be looking for?
Most importantly, one sec, wait, I've got stuff. Sorry, Scott.
That's okay.
Do you want to ask again, or shall I just start again?
Yeah, I'll ask again. So you mentioned obviously part of your role is building the development team at Howsy, and if you were going to hire a fresh graduate to join that team, what kind of skills, personality traits or experience would you be looking for?
Okay, yeah, we have had graduates for junior developer roles actually straight out of university quite recently. But most importantly, I guess, make sure that your CV is current and up to date. It lists all of the skills that you do have. And just as important, it doesn't list any skills that you don't have, because as I mentioned earlier, software engineering principles and basics are much more important than the languages that you know. If you're a graduate coming out of university and you've put, 20 different languages on your CV, and you haven't actually mastered them all, it's going to be very easy for us to find out at interview stage. It's better to list 2 or 3 that you know really well, because as I said, languages can be learned easily. Most of the time, any company you apply for, especially startup or tech-wise, they're going to send you a code challenge. It's really important to make sure that your code challenge is good. Make sure the code's well factored. Make sure you've got testing where appropriate. Because this is actually what I look at the most, more than the CV, definitely. If your code challenge is bad, your chances of getting an interview are pretty much zero. Because I've seen the work that you'll be sort of producing for us, and I can tell that it won't be good. So,
They don't make it through that stage if it's not good.
Yeah, absolutely not. No, and I imagine, well, speaking with other lead devs, that it's the same pretty much everywhere. If you're sent the code challenge, really, they should never take more than 2 or 3 hours, but make sure that you do spend the time appropriate on them, and make sure that it's reflective of your best work, because this is ultimately what you're going to be judged on before you get through to the next stage.
And I guess within coding and development, there isn't that much room for error or to learning on the job to an extent. But in that environment, a wrong code or mistakes could really sort of derail a project or be costly.
Well, we've obviously got there's testing and stuff in place to stop it. It's more for a junior role. Obviously, we expect there to be some learning on the job, but it's more just I guess caring about the work you produce. So when we receive a code challenge, it's really the challenge itself is very basic. We're really just looking if you can take a set of instructions and translate it into some code. So there shouldn't be too many errors in it, or any errors at all, really. And it really is just about making sure that you're passionate about the work you produce. That's basically it. Because there will be on-the-job learning, of course, and there is scope for error because when you're working with us, because we have automated testing and things like that. So if you were to submit a piece of work that didn't pass our unit testing, it would never get pushed to production and therefore never affect the customer.
Okay. And Dan, obviously, you mentioned that your route was unorthodox and that you didn't go to university to, get where you were. But if you were going to give one final piece of advice to, development and computer software students of today to make sure they're future-proofing their CV and their skills and to get on a career ladder in development, what would your advice be?
First piece is just to get out there and write code. One thing I haven't touched upon is contributing to open source. There's a lot of open source projects out there on GitHub that require people helping. You should have an active GitHub account where I can see that you are contributing to these projects, or even just writing your own code. It's great when I get an application from somebody and they've linked their GitHub account, and I can see that they are, writing code regularly. Even if it's for university projects, I'm not going to judge the code that's in there, but it's just really good to see somebody that is, actually writing code all of the time.
Yeah.
And like I said, you can do that via contributing to open source or just building your own side projects. That's one major thing I would say. And also just putting yourself out there. There's plenty of jobs in London for software engineering, and don't sort of limit yourself by the languages that you've already learned at university. If you're applying for a junior role and you've got good software engineering sort of basics, don't be put off because they're asking for a language that you don't necessarily know very well, because you can learn it very quickly. I've taken on developers here that don't write in the primary language that we use in junior roles. I've taken them on because I can see that they've got good software engineering basics, and they've actually submitted their code challenge in a language that we don't even use here. Yeah. But I can read the code and it looks good. So, and they've made it through because of their soft skills and because they applied. So I would say don't be put off by things like that.
Great, that's really good advice. And Dan, thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully this will be useful to obviously development and computer software students that are looking to get into their career.
Yeah, definitely, hopefully. And if guys are looking for a job and you see one from Howsy, just message me or something.
Yeah, perfect. Cheers, Dan.
No worries. Cheers, Scott.
I hope you enjoyed episode 2 of Behind the Job. Thanks very much to Dan for joining us this week. Dan gave us some really great insight into life as a developer, his unconventional journey, but also as a student, if you're going for an entry-level job within the tech or development industries, what can you expect? He provided great insight into what he's looking for when he's hiring junior developers to join his team, and I'm sure you'll agree it was really useful. We've got another great guest lined up next week, so make sure you join us for that, and have a great weekend.